Hello, everyone. Welcome to our 11th webinar on the Secret Doctrine. This and all subsequent webinars will be available on makara.us. This is their new look. It's under a subheading, which you see circled there at the top, called MF Webinars. So, as you know by now, we began each webinar by tracing HPB and Colonel Olcott's travels as described in old diary leaves. Last month found HPB and Colonel Olcott arriving in Colombo, Sri Lanka, where they were greeted by thousands, actually tens of thousands of enthusiastic Buddhist followers. The next several pages of the diary leaves reads like the chronicles of a popular rock band. They toured the island, delivering as many as 4 speeches a day, each to thousands of people. Here are some quotes that hopefully will give us an idea of what our intrepid duo experienced. Can we get a reader for this first of 3 quotes?
Helen, can you read that for us, please?
All right. The besieging of us by crowds was even worse here, Colombo, than it had been elsewhere. We had not a free moment nor the least privacy. The papers were full of stories about us, and the Christians raged. To prepare my lecture for the next evening, I had to retire to Sumangala's college and write in the library with locked doors. I spoke standing on a large table placed in the middle of the preaching hall, so as to be better heard by the throng. The hall and compound were packed with people like herrings in a barrel, and the heat was most oppressive. The place was gaily decorated with flags and colored cloths, a handsome arch of split palm leaves worked into all sorts of pretty designs over a framing of areca palm timbers towered outside, and on the wall above the regular pulpit was suspended a monster replica in gilt paper of our society's seal.
Thank you, Helen. Okay, next.
Shall I carry on?
Oh, actually, maybe.
I was just going to say, Asha, can you carry on for us, Asha? Well, I'm not hearing her, so let's go back to, yes, Helen, if you could then please continue.
The next day there were 2 lectures. The first was at Kota, a village 6 miles from town, the ancient seat of a powerful king, where there were triumphal arches and no end of flags and greenery bordering the roads. The other was at Widyodaya College on the subjects of nirvana, merit, and the education of Buddhist children. I have begun my appeals in this latter direction at Gale, and throughout the whole tour used my best endeavors to make the people realize the risk they ran in leaving their children to be prejudiced against their ancestral religion by its professed enemies, Protestant Christian missionaries, who were in the country for no other object than this. It is a source of great satisfaction to know that the admonitions were not in vain, and that the present comprehensive and successful movement for promoting the foundation of Buddhist schools dates from this important tour.
Thank you, Helen. It's hard to imagine now, but at this time, the grip of a missionary influence in India and Ceylon was very strong. I mean, it was a British colony, and it was believed by Christians that, you know, all these people were doomed to, you know, to hell for their belief system. And so you can imagine their delight in in Blavatsky and Olcott when they came along and told them, no, this isn't true at all, and often would defeat notable Christians in open debate. And that's the reason for their extraordinary popularity. It was really the only non-Indian voice that was brought forth in their favor. So, okay, next up.
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. A visit to Kalani Temple, one of the most revered shrines on the island, where the great stupa rests over genuine relics of the Buddha himself, and the inevitable lecture and multitudinous audience occupied the next day. And on the following one, we organized the Colombo Theosophical Society with 27 members as a beginning. I submitted to the branch my plan for the creation of a Buddhist section to be composed of 2 subdivisions, one exclusively layman and lay branches, and another not itself subdivided exclusively of priests. The scheme was approved by all and carried out in due course.
Thanks, Scott. So I'm including this, in some ways not as entertaining interludes, because it wasn't just about her being able to produce phenomenon, which is, incredibly interesting, but to give you some sense of the impact that they were making pretty much everywhere they went. Okay, so let me come up to speed here. We left off last month with a discussion of the first verse of the first stanza, really the beginning of the beginning, from the Stanzas of Dzyan, which reads, "The eternal parent space, wrapped in her ever invisible robes, had slumbered once again for 7 eternities." Specifically, we were considering through HPB's commentary just what is meant by the term 7 eternities. HPB states, very first comment she makes, by the 7 eternities, eons or periods are meant. The word eternity is understood in Christian theology has no meaning to the Asiatic ear, except in its application to the one existence, nor is the term sempiternity, unchanging, everlasting, the eternal only in futurity, anything better than a misnomer. Okay, so we covered this last time. HPB's next statement, actually, let's get a reader for this, and this is really where we begin. I think we actually read this, but didn't discuss it much, so let's start here.
Okay, Michael, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Such words do not and cannot exist in philosophical metaphysics, and were unknown till the advent of ecclesiastical Christianity. The 7 eternities meant are the 7 periods, or a period answering in its duration to the 7 periods, of a Manvantara, and extending throughout a Mahakalpa, or the Great Age, 100 years of Brahma, making a total of 311 trillion 40 billion of years, each year of Brahma being composed of 360 days, and of the same number of nights of Brahma, reckoning by the Chandrayana or lunar calendar, and a day of Brahma consisting of 4,320,000,000 of mortal years.
Thank you. Good deciphering of those long numbers.
I've looked at it before.
Yeah, that helps. So any thoughts or questions about this segment? This introduces us to the nomenclature of what is called in Sanskrit a maha, which means great, kalpa, which is a period, right? So it's stupendous numbers, but the teaching is actually straightforward enough. Anybody have any questions about this or thoughts about this teaching?
Please go ahead, Scott.
I'm always curious about the 4,320,000,000 years when we compare it to astronomy
Actually, 4
today.
trillion 320 billion.
Right,
Yeah.
so I'm missing some zeros there. Comparing it to where science puts us. Astronomy,
Yeah.
the age of the universe at this point. Are we talking of the universe or our universe as the solar system?
Well, it's interesting because you're looking at, you're not told. First of all, we're not told what this applies to, what this period. I mean, is it, as you say, is it a universe? Is it the solar system? Is it a single scheme? Because after all, a scheme represents 7 chains, each with its multiplicity of globes and races. So we just don't know the application. However, because we've been talking so macrocosmically, it suggests that we're not suddenly talking about solar reality, but we don't have that info for sure.
It seems to be so that it's the greater universe that we see out there.
Yeah.
Just
Indeed.
because the numbers are so big, I think that's part of it.
Yes, indeed.
We're not used to thinking of those kind of numbers in terms of our solar system at all.
Well, even science isn't, I think science has it at 13 billion years for the universe, the visible universe, in terms of, this, was it that infrared delay that they're able to determine the distance to the edge of the universe, right? But this is based on what's visible, in this one great clump of stars. And of course, what's meant by universe and science,
Right.
and what's indicated here don't necessarily have anything to do with each other.
Yeah, and we're looking at time in the universe in terms of the speed of light, and is that really what's going on? Looking back in time, is that really what's happening? I don't know.
It's interesting to note, though, that at the time this was written, that I'm not even sure if a galaxy had been determined yet, had been discovered. I think that's a fairly late discovery, just the fact of a galaxy. I'm not sure here, exactly in terms of this was 1888, but certainly not trillions of galaxies, which is what we know now to be the case. So even though it's not directly correlated, in some ways, science's advancement since the time this was written is, in a sense, towards these greater numbers compared to what was known in HPB's day. But I agree with you that there must be a real disconnect between known science, even today's known science, and these figures. Yeah.
And are these to be trusted truly, or are they blinds? Did you add 3 zeros? I don't know.
Well, that's always
another question.
It sure is.
Answer to. We have no answer to that.
It sure is. And that gets into, the nature of the blind and why it's set up, and the fact that they always lead for one who has some other information to a kind of truth. Or it means that it's applicable on certain levels and not on others,
Right.
So, yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
All right. So, if there's no other thoughts or questions.
We have another hand.
Good.
Please go ahead, Michael. You're on self-mute.
Okay. These total years are related to what we consider duration from our small planet within this great life of which we're a part. And when we look at this total duration, that doesn't necessarily mean it's related to the physical manifestation of this life.
Yeah, very good point. I mean, it would be almost arbitrary to imagine that our particular form aspect, which denotes our experience of time, is going to govern the length of time of all creation. It's the best you could say, and we can't even say this for sure, is that it governs it from our physically incarnate perspective. But you've got a whole bunch of question marks. Yeah, that's a really good point, Michael. Just that, for example, another civilization on another planet in another solar system, very, not only possibly, but very likely has a completely different concept of the passage of time. And since there's certainly an infinite number of those perspectives, that really puts the big question mark on any one way of measuring this totality.
And it also becomes totally different when we transcend the limitations of the form that we incarnate in.
Yes, in fact, there's going to be a DK quote from, I think it's from Esoteric Healing, that shows just how quickly we leave time as we know it behind when you move out of incarnation. So yeah, we'll be coming up on that.
All right.
Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts or comments about this
Yes.
part?
Yes. Anna, please go ahead. Anna, are you there?
Oh, she's having trouble getting through. It looks like we're gonna have to come back.
Right, I can't. I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Sorry. Maybe you can figure out a different kind of microphone setup, and because we'd love to have you participate. An option to that is to type your question in the chat box, which is on your little control panel there, and you'll find it down at the bottom. It's actually the last section. It has a little collapsed arrow by it. Click on it and type in your question there, and we'll or your comment, and we'll address it at that point. Okay. Anyone else? Oops. I need to do that.
That's
Anyone
all I
else?
got right now. That's
Okay.
all I got right now.
All right. Next, through the number 7, we have an introduction to the concept of a sacred number in geometry. She uses the number 7 to kind of move us into this realm, which is the study of the esoteric potency of numbers. Extremely important concept. 7, we learn, is a particularly relevant when determining the duration of time cycles. So, because the number 7 figures so prominently throughout the Secret Doctrine, let's step aside, take a closer look at this number before we read this section. HPB tells us that the energy inherent in the number 7 is causal to and intrinsic in processes governing manifestation, which is why it is the key number in all time cycles determining manifestation. The planes and subplanes of manifestation, the energetic aspects occurring during manifestation via the rays and the energy centers found in every unit of manifestation, whether these are chakras in a human unit or the 7 spirits before the throne of God. There are, in addition, 7 days in a week, which again make up a whole, 7 notes in a major scale, again making up a whole, and white differentiates into 6 colors, white being the synthetic 7th. This last example introduces another important aspect of 7, the synthetic or hidden 7th, which actually has the number 1, but it can be seen as a 7th when you're counting upwards. We see this in the first or eddy subplane of each plane indicated here. DK tells us, this is as an example of this hidden 7th. Oops, here we go. The number 7 is closely connected with the occult significance of the Pleiades, the 6th present and the 7th hidden. In conjunction with each other, this 1 and 6 are energetically, unquote. In conjunction with each other, this 1 and 6 are energetically descriptive of the will to be. That's why it's so key in all calculations determining manifestation. Another potency of 7ness manifests through the numbers 3 and 4 as component parts of 7. Pythagoras taught us that on the plane of the noumenal world, the triangle was the geometry of manifested deity, Father, Mother, Son, and the quaternary was the ideal root of all numbers and things on the physical plane. Thus, 7 was called by the Pythagoreans the vehicle of life, or consisted of body and spirit, what the Hindus call Purusha and Prakriti. But there is an even deeper relation between 3 and 4 within the energetic realm of 7. DK tells us, well, actually, let's get a reader for this, get some idea.
Carrie, can you read that for us,
Okay.
please?
Just as each plane has its 7 subplanes, so likewise each subplane can be subdivided, thus making 49 fires on every plane, or the 343 fires of the solar system. Herein can be found the clue to the mystery of the 4th between the 3, which has at times bewildered students of the occult records. There are several ways of reading these figures, 3, 4, 3, but the only occult method which can be hinted at here lies in the recognition of the 3 higher planes, the 3 lower planes, the 4th plane of meeting between them. This 4th plane has occultly been called the meeting place.
Yeah, the number 343 focuses on the center, where the 4 manifest, rather than the apex, which is what you get with the 6 and 1. And also links 7 to 10, through the double triangle, which HPB alludes to in her use of the number 7,000. Okay, so we'll get back to that in a moment. Okay, with this brief intro into the number 7, let's get back to the secret doctrine. By the way, the X that appears in this sentence is to be read X, not times. Could we get a reader for this sentence, please?
Oops, my bad. Michael, can you finish reading that slide for us? There you go.
Yeah. These eternities belong to the most secret calculations, in which, in order to arrive at the true total, every figure must be 7x, 7 to the power of x, x varying according to the nature of the cycle in the subjective or real world.
Thank you, Michael. So, Scott, I think, we get a little more of an answer to your question here, which is that these numbers probably can't be just taken at face value. That they're going to be at least this is my take on this. You could say it's one possibility, which is that they're a kind of general law or rule that is varies, as she says, according to the nature of the cycle, which is going to change the actual number in many, many different ways, depending on the cycle that we're talking about. Okay, we've looked a little at why the number 7 is a conditioning force of manifestation, but what does HPB mean by X varying according to the nature of the cycle in the subjective or real world? Any thoughts? Any ideas about why or how this this X variation would apply? I mean, first of all, by subjective or real world, she means the causal realms, right? Certainly not physical plane manifestation. So immediately we're in a different understanding of time. And it's here where the energy of 7ness conditions the blueprint of manifestation. It gets to be quite fascinating when you think of this instead of as math, as the consciousness which underlies the purpose of these manifestations, right? And how that affects the time aspect. So the key element in the statement is X varying according to the nature of the cycle, right? I mean, that's really what turns it on its head. So what might this mean? Anybody have any thoughts about this?
Michael, go ahead.
One way to look at it may be the great lives that embody the rays, and each one of those manifest for different durations.
Yes, I totally agree with you. I think that's always going to be a part of it. So there are many elements that impact a cycle, but I would agree with you that one of those elements is going to be the rays that are involved. That's going to change the nature of the cycle, certainly the amount of time involved. So yes, good one. We get a clue, a little more of a clue, when we finish the sentence here. Let's see, I think it's the next one. Yeah. And every figure, this is after what we just read, or number relating to or representing all the different cycles from the greatest to the smallest in the objective or unreal world must necessarily be multiples of 7. So I think the key is the term nature. Part of the quote nature unquote of a cycle is 1. You know, it's like what Scott was bringing forward. Are we talking about a universe, a galaxy, solar system, a scheme, a chain, a round, or just a globe or root race? You know, what's being impacted here? Another thing impacted is the units of consciousness. Like, is it the rocks, the frogs, or the humans that we're talking about, right? You know, and then there's the ray energies, as Michael brought up. And of course, all of these are interlinked and interconnected. Yeah. But what we're told is that all of them demonstrate in accordance with the energy of the number 7 in the objective or unreal world. So given these variations in scope and quality, type, etc., a cycle can last anywhere from literally a couple of decades, like the first ray cycle that takes place at the end of a century, to the trillions of years described in this commentary, all of which HPB tells us are conditioned by the qualities inherent in the number 7. So what might those qualities be? What is it about 7ness that makes it the governing energetic of manifestation? Well, unfortunately, I can't answer my own question, but we can speculate, and I welcome you to join me on that. One thought I had was that it seems that the interrelationship of the energies of rays 1 and 7 must play some key role. We might even surmise that 7's manifesting potency is directly triggered by the energetic resonance, which you could call the will to be, between rays 1 and 7. Of course, this is just speculation. I'm trying to illustrate that here in this. Nothing exact about this, just an idea. Just speculation, which HPB makes real clear in this next statement. The key to this cannot be given, for herein lies the mystery of esoteric calculations. And for the purposes of ordinary calculations, it makes no sense. So there's a little bit of the you can't get there from here quality to this. You also suspect that it's a secret of some initiation, maybe progressive initiations based on the cycles being revealed. Who knows? So, any further thoughts or comments about this? Any of this, but if you have any ideas about what in the number 7 could be the quality of energy that would make it so relevant for cycles of manifestation, and love to hear your ideas on that. Any thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, we have a couple of hands up. Scott, please go ahead.
I came across something on the number 7 here as we were dealing with the powers of 7 and just multiplying out the powers of 7, just 7 to the 0 power, which in math can be shown equals 1, and 7 to the 1st, and so on. And what's interesting there, looking at those big numbers, since we can't be sure certainly of the zeros, the significant digits are always the ones that he's dealing with. So it's everything but the zeros that we might be looking at the numbers of. And what happens with the powers of 7, very interestingly enough, as you develop them from 7 to 49 to 343 to 2,401 and so on, if you add up the digits in each of those numbers, the first power of 7 is 7, the second simplifies to 4, the third to 1, the fourth to 4, and it goes in that pattern, 417, 417, 417, all the way down for all the powers of 7. When you add up the digits and simplify the numerology of them.
Wow, that is fascinating. And of course, 2 of those numbers occur in our 311 trillion number, 40 billion. Yeah, most interesting.
There's another way of looking at 343. You can look at it as he's talking about it, or as a 10, and that's a 1. And so
right.
I don't see real patterns in the larger numbers of the digits. Why they would be particularly significant, because they simply total these numbers, but I don't see that they form any real pattern after 343.
Yeah, but you're talking about the it's so hard for us because we've been trained to think of numbers as counters. It's really hard for us to sort of easily flip to thinking of number in terms of particular forms of energy, right? So what were the numbers again? 1 and 4, huh? 1 and 4 and 7.
417, or it starts at 7 if you go 7 to the first. 7, 4, 1.
So
7,
I mean, just
4, 1.
from that, if you look at you
Yeah,
know,
the numbers.
Just from what I was just describing about
Exactly.
the nature of sevenness, that central area of represented by 4, and then the two extremes, 1 and 7. You know,
Exactly.
it's inherent in the energy. So 7, you could say, is a container for all 3 of those energies in relationship. Now, we still don't know what those energies are. They're 1, 4, and 7. You know, and you have to look at you know, the nature of those energies. But we know, for instance, about 4, that it's a number of manifestation. You know, if we go back here, let me go back to Pythagoras here. You know, that this, what does he say here? The quaternary, the 4, was the ideal root of all numbers and things on the physical plane. So, you know, since this number 7 is about time cycles as they apply to manifestation, it's quite natural that 4, being the root of all things on the physical plane, would be a part of that energetic, right? Then the other is 1 and 7. Of course, 7 being made up, interestingly, hidden in all this is 3. It doesn't show up as a sum in Scott's edition of these, you know, of these sums. It doesn't show up because it's not physical. It's the noumenal trinity. So it makes it in a way more. It's a more perfect understanding of this. It only is in its connection to 4 that this magical thing happens, right? Where oneness is able to manifest on the physical plane. So this, and of course, you know,
Hey,
this
you
is
guys.
just
I'm
working
sorry.
in the dark here. This is just speculation. Yes, yes, yeah.
I just got kicked out and came back, so
Oh,
I
hello.
hope I hope everything's good to go. And Joe, can you watch and make sure if I lose it again that
Yes,
you
I
can
will.
fill in? So thank
Yep.
you. I'm sorry. Go
Well,
ahead.
fortunately, BL, I was on a particularly long-winded point, so I didn't ask for anybody to be called on right then. So I'm glad you're back.
Well, that's good because you do have another hand when and if you're
Okay,
ready.
yes, let's. I'm ready. So let's hear what you have to say.
Okay, Michael, please go ahead.
Yeah, I am speculating that the number 7 in this particular system or universe or whatever is hidden in the purpose of the great life that's manifested. And just for this particular incarnation, in other incarnations, it could be a different number that, or what we consider as numbers. I have a recollection about in the previous solar system, 5 was somehow important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, right. A lot could be said about what you just said. There's this provocative phrase. It's actually in the last paragraph that ends section 1 of a treatise on cosmic fire that reveals that Sanat Kumara's number is 777, right? Which, when multiplied together, you have 343. And we just looked at that. So if you, again, drop the idea that this is some kind of sum, right? And look at it as an energetic, you can see that you have a triple manifesting energy just in that number, right? And that could be, one could imagine, could be applied on many levels. You could, one of the most obvious is that for humanity in the lower quaternary, our response or our connection with Sanat Kumara would be the manifestation of the mental, astral, and physical plane. But that's just scratching the surface as to what this number could mean. And then he also says, and I don't have the quote right in front of me, but he makes mention of other triple numbers. Do you remember, Scott, what those other numbers were offhand? It was either, 666 or 888.
666 is one. Yeah,
666 is another thing. 666 has to do with physical reality. And I don't remember if it's a logoic number. I tend to think
it's a planetary number.
It's a planetary number. Yeah.
Logoic, planetary logos.
Okay.
But I'm wondering if the time on that planet and the numbers on that planet of the system of 666 or 888 or whatever, especially if it's not a sacred planet, if their number system is based on that number and not 7. Maybe it's based on
interesting.
6.
Yeah.
But on Jupiter and Saturn, the more mature planets, maybe it's, who knows, whatever. Maybe that's set at that point at a different level. I don't know.
Yeah. I'll have to get back to you on how Jupiterians count their cycles of time.
You'd be the guy.
I would I? But just the idea that, actually Michael brought this up earlier, this idea that in another solar system or from another perspective, everything could be different. And the energetic of different numbers would be more dominant. Hey, even on our own globes, maybe 7, this is our 4th globe, right? Well, 4 is one of those hidden intrinsic numbers to 7, right? Maybe it all shifts once we get to the 5th globe. Just speculation, guys. We're already in the 5th root race, so who knows? But I'm just saying the look at number in terms of its force and its energy and of the particular quality of that energy rather than as just counters, because that's the least of it, especially when you're in the Secret Doctrine, and most of it is hidden from us, but a lot can be speculated on, and to good result. I see a hand went up.
Yes, and before that, though, I just wanted to mention, and again, you lost me for a few seconds there, so you may have mentioned this already, but when Scott was telling us about the sequence of the 7 and the 4 and the 1 and the 7 and the 4 and the 1, what I immediately thought of was, the 4 in the middle, like you did say, and then the power words for 7. Which are, of course, unpronounceable. I just love that part in the book where, I'm going to give you these words of power. And it's a string of about 25 consonants. But it translates to, roughly to the highest and lowest meet.
Well, there it is.
Which is the 7 and the 1. So that's what I thought of when Scott was relaying that. So.
Yeah. And, to add to what you just said, BL, that's the translation of this, this word, which we might, which would be possibly a translation of a Sinzar symbol, but it doesn't. The real potency of that translation is in the energetic experience of interfacing that symbol, which is then described as that word, which is then translated as the higher and the lower meet. But you have to remember that it's the energetic of that is revealed in Sinzar, and that's what it's really about. Is having an experience of that conditioning energy, right? It's the difference between lower and higher mind understanding, right? Thanks for that, BL. Let's get on to the question that's, I think they lowered their hand.
Yeah, they did. It was Helen. Let's see. Helen, did you have a question?
Well, I just wanted
comment?
to say that when you mentioned, you used the term resonance, and I'm not sure that I've got anything terribly clever to say about this, but thinking of the number 7 and X less as a number, but more as a resonance or a sound, I was reminded of, I think it was something I read in Viola Petit-Neil's book, Through the Curtain, and where she comes back from a night class and she is told that the universe is sound in sequence. So that was just sort of what suddenly made me think of that when you were speaking about resonance.
Yeah, that's very applicable. Thank you, Helen. Of course, sequence and cycle is basically the same, right? Because with each sequence, you have returned to the starting point of a new cycle, right? Of course, it's also always a progressive sequence, right? And with sound, well, you know, as I showed you before, there are 7 notes. Of course, you know, you could say, oh yeah, but that's just in the West, just on the major scale. But there's something that transcends the fact that it's just a Western scale. It's at a causal level that these 7 notes exist, right? In fact, they do exist in the East as well. It's just that there's more subdivision in the East, right? So that directly relates to what you were just saying. Could you mute whoever's BL, whoever's paper shuffling? Yeah. Yeah. So that's directly related to, you know, this idea of the music of the spheres in cyclic unfoldment, right? And 7 is key to music as it is to as it is to time, right? In fact, making a difference between those is kind of arbitrary. All right, anyone else before we move on to the next statement?
That's it for now.
Okay, of course we never leave this behind, we just move to another aspect of it. So next up, we have the number 7, says the Kabbalah, is the great number of the divine mysteries. Number 10 is that of all human knowledge, Pythagorean decade, and 1000 is the number 10 to the 3rd power, and therefore the number 7000 is also symbolical. So we have 4 statements, 4 discrete statements here. Anybody have any thoughts or questions about these as they stand? I went ahead and linked these. I thought it was peculiar that she would just make 4 statements, right, that are connected only by proximity. So if we assume that there is a progression in these 4 statements, we might rewrite her teaching like this. Through the divine mystery of the number 7, human knowledge, represented by the number 10, is expanded to its 3rd power, monadic awareness. This state of consciousness is represented by the number 7000. Is this what she means? Who knows? It might be one meaning, or it may be erroneous, but it's one way of unpacking these 4 statements. And I invite you to, you know, if you have any insights on what else might be meant by these 4 phrases, speak up. I just find it curious as she presents these 4 unrelated statements or unlinked statements, except for there's one therefore. Any thoughts, ideas about this?
Please go ahead, Scott.
I like your idea. just a general point I wanted that this describes, and looking back at the big numbers we've been looking at, we have to remember that it's not only the digits we see, but what numbers multiply or add, but basically multiply to make that number that are hidden.
Mm-hmm.
Such as we look at 7,000 and go, well, what is that? Why? And looking at 7 times 1,000 and breaking 1,000 down gives you several layers of meaning. And I think you look at these big numbers up here, and they all total to 9. The 2 big ones you have further up in the paragraph, the digits you see. So there's something about 9 there, and that being the number of consciousness, and that being what rules things in the end, not manifestation, not physical. But
it's also the number of initiation, and the number of fullest outer expression.
And the different ways we come to those numbers, we know about them. They've been in Indian numerology for a long time. How do you get to the 432 and the other? Just what numbers add, multiply, and they're not the same numbers either.
Yeah.
You know, it's a progression of numbers, one twice the other, whatever. So there's a lot hidden in each of these numbers, and different ways of unpacking them, as you say. Yeah,
indeed. 7,000 can be, 100 times 70. It could be, and you need to look, if you're, if this kind of thing rings your bell, if time spent on this can really brings forward some amazing, quote, coincidences, unquote, that, lead you further into the mysteries that they're basically blinding or holding, I think is a better word. One thing you want to get out of the habit of is just, when you come across a number like 311 trillion, is just dismissing it as, oh yeah, okay, big, large number, and going on, because there's a whole lot that's being indicated, right? So. Yeah, and of course, the main point is just the existence of the specific energies that exist in number, and that they're diverse and particular. Just that teaching alone is important. So, if you don't take this any further, that's fine. But to know that when you're reading esoteric literature is very important. If you're more interested, I did a 25 webinar series on sacred number. It's also recorded on makara.us. All right, let's move on.
Oh, we have another hand.
Okay, go ahead.
Oops. Go ahead, Michael.
Okay, I think perhaps a key to these 4 that link them together is the word symbolical. And because they are symbols, they could possibly have, each of them have 7 different meanings.
Yeah.
And so, we can hypothesize, we can conjecture, and at some level, each one of those conjectures and hypotheses are going to be correct, but it's going to be superseded by a deeper understanding as we grow in our service.
Yes, and one of the great powers of symbol, and you could just say that a number, a particular number is symbolic itself. I mean, it's a glyph. It's symbolic of an energy, right? Which is what a symbol is. Whether it's a specific character or a number, it's still a symbol. And one of the great powers of it is that it stays relevant as you move further into its understanding of its potency. So, initially it will reveal an outer truth. And as you suggested, as you move inwardly, well, if you're looking at a paragraph of words, it will often only have it has less relevance as you penetrate to the inner planes, but symbols tend to hold their relevancy for as you penetrate and stay relevant to that level that you're penetrating. You know, for instance, the number 777 as the glyph of Sanat Kumara. Well, the very fact that it is, you know, this is an amazing revelation we've been given, that this is the number that characterizes Sanat Kumara. Well, you know, it's going to be relevant at the very highest levels of initiation, that you get new truths about this aspect of Sanat Kumara are revealed as you move on. You know, so our job is just to get into the game, right? Start to play with this and get a sense of, you know, some of the possible relevance of these numbers. If this does nothing more than just get you interested in or introduce you to the possibility that that's can be done, you know, that these numbers hide and also reveal with a little attention, you know, then it will be successful. Okay, the 4 cosmic etheric planes. Wait a minute here. Where am I? Okay, I'm ahead of myself here. Yeah, here we go. All right. The beginning of HPB's final statement in this paragraph is, in the Secret Doctrine, the figure and number 4 are the male symbol only on the highest plane of abstraction. I really took the ball and ran with this, and I realized I had about a 20-minute presentation on this, which I then deleted because it just took us too far afield. But there's a lot just in this statement. What I did keep, though, was this fact: the assertion of 4 only on the highest plane of abstraction is illustrated in stanza 3, verse 7, which we'll be coming to at some point. Quote, he shines forth as the sun. He is the blazing divine dragon of wisdom. The one is 4, and 4 takes to itself 3, and the union produces the sapta, in whom are the 7, which become the tridasha, or the hosts and the multitudes. Now, I don't expect you to understand that, but here's just an example of how the 4 etheric planes, standing in a causal relation to the 3 planes of human endeavor, might be an example of 4 taking to itself the 3, right? So, okay, but I just saved you 15 minutes of further exploration of this idea. But back to the SD. On the plane of matter, the 3 is the masculine and the 4 is the feminine. It's just reversed. The upright and the horizontal and the 4th stage of symbolism, when the symbols became the glyphs of the generative powers on the physical planes. So, you know, while you're thinking about that, you have any thoughts or questions, you may remember that this chart from earlier in the proem, the 4th stage of symbolism referred to is the bottom set of uncircled symbols, which deal with the generative form aspect. HPB specifically references the 2 arms of the cross. The number 3 represented by the masculine vertical, and the 4, the feminine horizontal arm. This is, you know, the cross of spirit and matter, and where they meet is the generative point. Okay, so any thoughts on any of these ideas? So let me go back here to this. Any thoughts on this final comment? Yeah, I see a hand. Are you with me? Yes, I see. BL, are you there? Maybe BL got knocked out again. Scott, go ahead. Scott?
Let me
Emily?
unmute him.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you.
There he goes.
There you go. Going back to this, the beginning of that statement where the figure 4 is male symbol only in the highest plane of abstraction, takes me back to that quote sort of you had on Pythagoras way back when, where he's talking
Oh,
about,
right. Yeah.
and that's that level of 4 just coming into it measures, it governs everything on the physical plane. So it generates as a father, as it were, everything on the physical plane. So it's going to be primary on the male on the, for generating 4-ness, physicality. Yeah. And then there's that, this is that 3-4-3, it's in the middle there, but you've got the higher 3. And it takes a lower 3 in terms of the lower planes, but it also takes to it in its own development, maybe the higher 3, like the 7.
Yeah. It's all about perspective there. You know, it's like you're saying that it has to do with this idea of the will to be, you know, as the father aspect, that then in a sense manifests that will through the quaternary or the 4-ness. But the actual manifestation itself is then the feminine principle, because it's polar opposite, right? And then you have the triplicity, which is the manifest deity, becomes the masculine principle. That's that peculiar reversal. Yeah, anything else, Scott, on that idea?
Oh, we could riff on this for a while.
Oh yeah.
Let's not.
Okay. Let's not.
Move on.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, let me get back here to where we are. All right. Okay, well, on to verse 2 of stanza 1, right? How are we doing on time? Let's see, when did this start? Oh, yeah,
About an
we're
hour
good.
ago, we're
Okay.
good.
Yeah, good. Okay, great. Speaking of which, time was not, and I lost it there for a moment. For it lay asleep in the infinite bosom of the webinar. I mean, of duration. Okay, this is our next verse. You may have noticed how extraordinarily potent or compact these verses are. So much so that when you're just reading through them, they don't reveal themselves much at all. They're like nuggets of potency that you have to spend some time exploring. So just on the surface, before we look at HPB's commentary on this one second verse of the first stanza, do any thoughts come to mind? Time was not, for it lay asleep in the infinite bosom of duration. What does that bring up for you? Any thoughts about this? Let's take a look at the first part of the commentary and see if that will.
Scott has a comment, I believe. Oh,
Okay.
I got it, Scott.
Okay. Was that in the chat section?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. I think we lost BL. What a shame.
Did. We lost both BLs.
Oh, that's even, gosh.
Yeah, more serious than we had thought.
Yeah. Too bad. That's the first time in all my association with her that's happened. Anyway, so let's take a look at the first part of the commentary, and let's get a reader for this.
All right, Asha, you're back with us. I'll unmute you and see if you can get your mic going. Asha?
A hand just went up, so you might,
All right.
that might be a volunteer.
Time is only an illusion produced by the succession of our states of consciousness as we travel through eternal duration. And it does not exist alone in consciousness. It does not exist where no consciousness exists in which the illusion can be produced, but lies asleep. The present is only a mathematical line which divides that part of eternal duration which we call the future from that part which we call the past. Nothing on earth has real duration, for nothing remains without change or the same for the billionth part of a second. And the sensation we have of the actuality of the division of time known as the present comes from the blurring of that momentary glimpse or succession of glimpses of things that our senses give us as those things pass from the region of ideals, which we call the future, to the region of memories that we name the past. In the same way, we experience a sensation of duration in the case of the instantaneous electric spark by reason of the blurred and continuing impression on the retina.
Okay, this it's the concept is not as complicated as it seems. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions about this idea? You know, with I see a hand.
Yes, I think that's Trudy volunteering to read, but let's see what she has to say. Hi, Trudy.
Do you want me to read or just comment?
Well, yeah, if you have a question or a comment, or it's not a forced thing here. If you have a question or comment, feel free.
Well, time can only be an illusion because it's just exists when we exist in physicality.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Thank you for that. This is true. It's a function of the relationship to our consciousness in physicality. So with verse 2, this old commentary introduces the distinction between absolute undivided duration, which in Sanskrit is called kala, K-A-L-A, and linear manifested divided illusory time, the latter being a phenomenon of the former. In the Secret Doctrine, duration is described as endless perpetuity, which the Greeks call chronos. Philosophical argument is time does not exist where no consciousness exists in which the illusion can be produced, suggesting that the very existence of manifested time requires the presence of consciousness, right? It's kind of a riff on if a tree falls in the woods and there's no one there to hear it, right? Was a sound made? It's, did time pass if there's no one there to register this time? So one symbol for kala, or undivided duration, is the Ouroboros, which suggests that unlike linear illusory time, the beginning, end, and all the intermediary stages of a cycle are one. That's one of the teachings of the Ouroboros. But most of HPB's comments focus on how consciousness generates illusion by perceiving time as something that slips from the future into the past. Long before Ram Dass and Eckhart Tolle developed their teaching around the idea of the now, the ancient wisdom teachings recognized that that point of time, DK calls it the eternal now, that we call the now, is the path that comes closest to aligning us with kala, or absolute undivided duration.
Diana has a comment.
Yeah.
Diana, I'm going to unmute you. See how your sound is, Diana. I can read it also.
Okay, thank you.
She says, if time is only an illusion, this means that after the fifth initiation, we will be transcending it by duration state. Is that and it's a question actually. If time is an illusion, does this mean that after the fifth initiation, we will transcend it by duration state?
A duration state.
Diana, do you want to clarify that? You're unmuted if you want to speak.
Just, what you meant by duration state. I understood the rest of your question. So are we going to transcend it by what?
Hello? Can you
Yeah.
hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I am wondering if after the fire initiation, time, the conscious of time will disappear, and we are going to have some kind of duration state of conscience. Yes.
I see what you mean.
Like,
I see.
Like you say about
Yeah, some experience of this idea of kala, which is absolute undivided duration. Yeah. It happens actually, time is changes in our consciousness well before the fifth initiation. In fact, all you have to do is die, and time, the experience of time changes. And there's been a lot written about in which way. In fact, we're going to be reading a quote here by DK soon about the nature of this experience of the eternal now. But I would say that this is a progressive, it's just my speculation, that it's a progressive experience of this concept of kala, because once you have kala or absolute undivided duration in its fullness, you have become one with the one life, because you have transcended all intermediary states of consciousness just through your experience of undivided duration. And so I would say that certainly the experience of a master of wisdom, a fifth initiate, or master of compassion, is inconceivable compared to our experience of time, that there are still many further stages to go on the path of recognition of this quality that we call time. However, the nature of time changes much before that, and it has a lot to do with whether you're in form or out of form, right? So a master of wisdom who's in form, for instance, would be aware in their form nature of time as it exists on the planet, right? It's just in their daily life. But when they connect with their mastery, that is, as the point in the center of samashramik presence, then they would come to an entirely and inconceivable to us understanding of time cycles. I hope that helps a little bit.
Michael Stacy, go ahead.
Yes, even in our waking consciousness, we can experience and usually do experience this illusion of time. When we are deeply engrossed in a subject of great concern, this illusion of time, it slips by so fast. And yet, when we're waiting for the computer to boot up and be usable, it takes forever.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. It's a subjective experience.
Yeah. But when we leave our waking consciousness into sleep, we're conscious on a different plane of awareness. And we may not bring that memory back with us, but time is complete, or the illusion of time is completely different when we're there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's subjective. I mean, because we have mechanical apparatus, including atomic clocks that absolutely measure time, we tend to forget that in fact it's very subjective, in how it impacts us. So yeah, that's a good point. In other words, we certainly don't have to go beyond our form nature to have a different experience of time. Let's look at the rest of the commentary on this verse 2, because it's directly related. Could we get a reader for this?
Karen, can you read? I'll unmute you. Let's see. Hi, Karen.
Hi. Okay, the real person or thing does not consist solely of what is seen at any particular moment, but is composed of the sum of all its various and changing conditions, from its appearance in the material form to its disappearance from the earth. It is these sum totals that exist from eternity in the future and pass by degrees through matter to exist for eternity in the past. No one could say that of a bar of metal dropped into the sea came into existence as it left the air and ceased to exist as it entered the water, and that the bar itself consisted only of that cross-section thereof, which at any given moment coincided with the mathematical plane that separates and at the same time joins the atmosphere and the ocean. Even so, of persons and things, which dropping out of the to be into the has been, out of the future into the past, present momentarily to our senses a cross-section, as it were, of their total selves as they pass through time and space as matter on their way from eternity to another, from one eternity to another. And these two constitute that duration in which alone anything has true existence, were our senses but able to cognize it there.
Thank you for that, yes. So this segment describes the nature of kala, or duration, making the argument that a person or thing is in actuality the sum total of all its states of existence, right? From the has-been to the to-be, right? Presumably of all it has been and will be during a manvantara, not just in a lifetime. This is perhaps the best description we've seen, or analysis we've seen, of just beingness, right? And so to add an addendum to that answer that I gave about the fifth initiate, your grasp of this quality of beingness, which can be described as identification with the divine principle, determines your level of consciousness, right? Coincidentally, we have in this sum total of all the has-been states, to all the will-be states, we have in that a demonstration of the fact that we are one with our monads, because that's what we came from and to which we will return. And so in the truth of our total states of being and becoming, we are, that totality is our monad. Right? This is aptly illustrated by this circle with a point at the center. The space within the circle here representing kala, all those points of time wherein all the stages of becoming that comprise the experience gained by the monad, both in and out of its myriad incarnations, takes place, all on that white disk, right? All those points of being and becoming and everything that we have been, you know, including in previous kingdoms, right? Like as animals and plants and minerals. The point at the center symbolizes the monad. Thus, within the framework of endless duration, or kala, the periphery, the space, and the point become one. From this perspective on time, we see that linear time provides only a consecutive series of snapshots of all the consecutive stages that make up the whole, the kala, which provides the environment of the true self. That's why HPB used that illustration of a bar of iron suddenly, you know, appearing from beneath the clouds and then very quickly plummeting into the ocean, that the now represents that little bit of time that we can see it. Yes, but its total state is all that it has been and all that it will become. So kala, or endless duration, is one with, I dare not use the word conditions, the absolute. It's another way of describing the absolute. Okay, any thoughts? And this is the absolute. Any thoughts about this? Here, let me go back here. Any thoughts about this idea about has been, will be? It's always better to be a will be than a has been. You know?
I don't see any hands yet.
Okay, it's, you know, in a way, it's fairly straightforward to understand this idea. I mean, to grasp it, to experience it is another thing, but to conceptually understand it, that we are the sum total of all the states of being, is, you know, an understandable concept. Okay, then, if there are no further questions, let's move into verse 3, the third short statement of the first stanza of Dzyan. So I will read it because it's so short. Universal mind was not, for there were no ahi, celestial beings, to contain, hence to manifest it. Universal mind, that is. So let's get into the comments, and it's just a short comment here that we'll start with. Mind is a name given to the sum of the states of consciousness grouped under thought, will, and feeling. Okay, so we come to a difference here between Bailey teachings and this traditional theosophy. Bailey considers feeling to be a function of the astral vehicle, not of the mind. Nonetheless, the comments that follow this statement definitely ring true. So could we get a reader for this next sentence?
Carrie, would you be able to read this for us?
During deep sleep, ideation ceases on the physical plane, and memory is in abeyance. Thus, for the time being, mind is not, because the organ through which the ego manifests ideation and memory on the material plane has temporarily ceased to function.
Okay, straightforward enough, right? In sleep, the mind goes into another state. Thoughts or questions about this? Okay. Let's Carrie, I mean, would you continue with this statement?
A noumenon can become a phenomenon on any plane of existence only by manifesting on that plane through an appropriate basis or vehicle.
Okay, this is a basic but very important philosophical statement, right? All phenomena is spirit manifesting through some appropriate vehicle, right? Okay, again, pretty straightforward. So let's take it to the next one. And you're on a roll, Carrie, so just continue if you would.
During the long night of rest called pralaya, when all the existences are dissolved, the universal mind remains as a permanent possibility of mental action, or as that abstract absolute thought of which mind is the concrete relative manifestation.
Okay, thank you. So this introduces some real philosophical substance here. In fact, this statement takes us back to what HPB calls the one attribute of the absolute, whose descriptors are in the upper right column under the heading Absolute Abstract Motion. In the verse 3 commentary, we learn that universal mind is a permanent possibility of mental action. That's what HPB says. Interesting to consider a possibility as the root of mind. In some ways, I prefer the term potentiality, but both bring forth a different idea. So further into the Secret Doctrine, we're told that it is to Fohat that the ideas of universal mind are impressed upon matter. So we start to get this idea of something that is in complete abstraction. If you look on the list there, there's this one title is pre-cosmic ideation. I think in some ways that's the best descriptor of this mental aspect, which is purely in utero. That is, it is not manifesting as mind at all, right? And this, of course, leads us to the conclusion that within the potentiality of universal mind are the noumena of all ideas. Perhaps this is what is meant by pre-cosmic ideation. Any thoughts or questions about this idea? Anyone?
No hands or questions yet.
That's fine. It's a words can only get us a certain distance towards these concepts, right? Because the very fact of them being words makes them fall short of being able to actually describe what they're trying to describe. In every title on this page falls under that fact. There's no descriptor that is actually accurate in describing these states of consciousness, right? Nonetheless, we do what we can, right? Okay, so next up, we have the, well, let's get somebody to read this.
Let's see. Janet, I don't know if you're a regular reader, but let me try unmuting you, and you're self-muted. Would you be able to read for us? Maybe not. Let's go back. How about Trudy? I'm going to unmute you, Trudy. There you go.
The Ahi Dhyan Chohans are the collective hosts of spiritual beings, the angelic hosts of Christianity, the Elohim and the messengers of the Jews, who are the vehicle for the manifestation of the divine or universal thought and will. They are the intelligent forces that give to and enact in nature her laws, while themselves acting according to laws imposed upon them in a similar manner by still higher powers, but they are not the personifications of the powers of nature as erroneously thought.
Thank you. They're not the personifications because they're in fact vehicles for these with their own highly developed state of consciousness, right? Okay, before we analyze this statement, let's take a look at the Theosophical Glossary's definition of Dhyani Chohan, a term that recurs throughout the Secret Doctrine. So we might as well become familiar with what it means now. She gives us a thumbnail definition here, but I found this Theosophical definition really useful. So could we get a reader for this extended definition of Dhyani Chohan?
Michael Stacy, would you?
Yes, Dhyani Chohans. Tibetan Chohan Lord, Lords of Meditation. In Theosophical literature, Dhyani Buddhas are the intellectual architects, the higher and more spiritual beings of the God world. Dhyani Chohans, as a generalizing term, includes both the higher classes, which take a self-conscious active part in the architectural ideation of the universe, and the lower classes, some of which are self-conscious, but in their lower representations progressively less on a descending scale. The lowest of these builders are little more than merely conscious or semi-conscious beings following almost servilely the ideation of the cosmic spirit transmitted to them by the higher class of the architects. Dhyani Chohan is likewise synonymous in one sense with the Sanskrit Manu. The 7 principal classes of Dhyani Chohans are intimately connected, each to each, respectively, with the 7 sacred planets of our solar system, and likewise with the globes of the Earth planetary chain. Furthermore, there is a class of Dhyani Chohans at the head of every department of nature in our solar system. These Dhyani Chohans, as the summit of the hierarchy of light, embody in themselves as individuals the ideation of the cosmic logos, thus forming the laws according to which nature exists and works. These laws, therefore, are really the automatic spiritual activities of the highest classes of the Dhyani Chohans. The Dhyani Chohans have their bodhisattvas, intellectual offspring or representatives on and in each descending cosmic plane, so that every being has as its highest portion one such Dhyani Chohan as its egoic individuality. Hence, the Dhyani Chohans are actually in one most important sense our own selves. We were born from them. We were their monads. We were the atoms, the souls projected, sent forth, emanated by the Dhyanis.
Thank you, Michael. So it's a phenomenal concept, this, the idea of the Dhyanis. Do you have any thoughts or questions about this definition? I found one of the most provocative ideas in this is that the Dhyani Chohans take a self-conscious, active part in the architectural ideation of the universe. So it doesn't just happen automatically, that there are these incomparably great beings who build the thought structure. They're like emissaries from this this pre-cosmic ideation, this level of cosmic mind, and they give it form. And it's in that form, actually, it's described here as being architectural. It's the you could say the guiding series of thought forms that become the laws of nature, right? So it's you have this building of this great interrelated structure of divine ideas known to us as the laws of nature. And yet, as HPB points out, these beings are not the ideas themselves, but use them as tools to construct the laws of nature. So any thoughts about this? This is actually, if you unpack this, there are some extraordinary concepts in there, but because it's it's not directly from the Secret Doctrine, we won't take it on right now.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yes, I see a hand.
Yeah, I was thinking in terms of architects. In a Masonic way of looking at architects, that is the third person in the upper triangle. It's the third logos that creates from that the square, the form world. Above the architects are the geometricians.
Right.
And above that is the Father. So we're actually dealing at the third point, or the unknown, that one will aspect. We're dealing from the third going into the lower quaternary here in one
That's right.
sense.
That's interesting. And of course, the symbol for that level, the third logos, is the circle with a cross in it, are the horizontal and vertical, which gets back to the idea of the four as the Father aspect, when seen in the light of the creating Father, right? 4 above, 3 below idea again. Yeah, very interesting. The architect is this third aspect, standing in relation to the geometrician, whose you could say whose will the architect further manifests. Anything else, Scott, about that?
No.
Yeah.
Leave it there.
We have another hand. Michael, go ahead.
This, to me, describes an entire hierarchy of divine emanations. And so as we go through reading the Secret Doctrine, there may not be clarification on which level of Dhyani Chohans she's referring to.
Yes, indeed. It's so similar to this nested quality of the Davic kingdom, where you have within the manifested consciousness of some great Dhyani Chohan, this host of lesser beings who are in lockstep with the will of that being, in terms of manifesting it. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, Russian nesting dolls.
Yes, indeed. I think that's the higher meaning of those dolls, and indeed, And HPB was Russian, so there you have it. Okay, any other thoughts about this? This is, really interesting stuff to me, anyway. Let's get back to the quote that this came from and read that now. Michael, why don't you go ahead since you're speaking.
The Ahi, Diana Chohans, are the collective hosts of spiritual beings, the angelic hosts of Christianity, the Elohim and messengers of the Jews, who are the vehicle for the manifestation of the divine or universal thought and will. They are the intelligent forces that give to and enact in nature her laws, while themselves acting according to laws imposed upon them in a similar manner by still higher powers. But they are not the personifications of the powers of nature, as erroneously thought.
So I know we read this before, but here we're also bringing forward the idea that they themselves, even at this highest level described, stand in a subsidiary position to still higher potencies, which could take us back to Scott's comment. You know, the difference between the architect and the divine geometrician, right? Who is working at more causal levels. So let's finish this commentary on this third verse. Can we get another reader, please?
Sheldon, I'm going to unmute you. Hopefully you can get your mic going. He's there.
You there, Sheldon? Okay.
Okay, yes. Oh, God. Sorry about this. Universal mind was not, for there were no Ahi, celestial beings, to contain, hence to manifest it.
We go down to this hierarchy.
Hierarchy of spiritual beings. Oh, yeah.
Go ahead. You're right on.
This hierarchy of spiritual beings through which the universal mind comes into action is like an army, a host, truly by means of which the fighting power of nations manifests itself, and which is composed of army corps, divisions, brigades, regiments, and so forth, each with its separate individuality or life and its limited freedom of action and limited responsibilities, each contained in a larger individuality to which its own interests are subservient, and each containing lesser individualities in itself.
Yes. So the most esoteric phrase here is the last one, each containing lesser individualities in itself. It's a more esoteric definition of the term host and suggests this structure, as I mentioned before, of the David kingdom. But as human beings, we too are participants in this interconnected hierarchy of consciousness, both through the fact that we're threefold, you know, as personalities, souls, and monads, as well as through our group and ashramic affiliations. So it's, you know, it's an example to help describe the nature of these hierarchy of spiritual beings. Any thoughts or questions on this? Anyone? Or on the whole idea of universal mind? I think one of the more important takeaways here is if we go right back to the verse itself, which is that universal mind itself was not, because it requires these great dhyanic chohans to implement it before you could say, before universal mind is. So it's some numinal storehouse of ideation that pre-exists these ahi or dhyanic chohans, and somehow in their coming forth is the concept of universal. Does the concept of universal mind actually come into being? So that's one of the more important ideas connected with this. Okay, I'm thinking that this might be a good time to pull the plug. We're at an hour and 45. The next verse is, she gets into quite an extent. So I think we'll end the webinar here and pick up with verse 4 at the next webinar, webinar 12. It's hard to believe that we've been at this for nearly a year. So thanks all. Thank you all for participating. I very much appreciate your involvement. And
thank you, Francis.
Hope to see you next time. So thank you.
You have a comment, great presentation with great group participation from Dwayne.
Oh, good, Dwayne. It's been great to have heard from you. You want to spend 5 or 10 minutes talking about everything we talked about? Just kidding. It was great to have you with us. Anyone else? Okay, thank you all again.